Hello and welcome to this Oak Tree English video on revising for Component 2 of the EDUQAS English Language GCSE. This is just intended to be a short guide for some last-minute preparations for Component 2 of your EDUQAS English Language exam. As you know, it's in two parts, reading and writing. In the reading part, I'm going to remind you of the SARC procedure. And in the writing section, I'm going to remind you what transactional writing is and how to plan for it. SARC stands for Survey, Analyse, Reference and Check. The first thing you should do is survey your text. That is, skim read it, letting your eye jump from paragraph to paragraph without majoring on the minors. That is, emphasizing the details. You're just getting an overview so you can navigate the text better later on. Then you need to analyze the question, which we will think about on the next slide. Most of your time, however, will be spent referencing your answer. That is, answering the question from the text. You're not being tested on what you know about any given topic, but on how well you can interpret and evaluate a text. Finally, you should leave 5 minutes or so to check that you have answered the questions fully. You're not marked on SPAG until the writing element, so don't waste too much time on checking for accuracy, unless of course you find a grievous error. Excuse me. In this paper, there are 6 questions. How many? 6. Thanks for that. A quick and a long question for each text, and then a quick and a long question comparing. They're usually the same format, so excuse me. So question 1 asks you to find 3 things in the text. This prepares you to navigate the text and should be done in about 3 minutes to attain 3 marks. Question 2 asks you to analyze the writer's skill. So this is a 10-mark question, so allow a good 10 minutes for it. You should write about 3 to 4 paragraphs with the point, evidence, explain structure. For top marks, you should also include a technique such as the DeForest devices, which we'll talk about in a moment, and some implicit observations, putting together 2 or more pieces of information. Remember, this is an exam testing how well you engage with the text. Question 3 is another comprehension exercise, this time to prepare you to engage with text 2. Question 4 uses that preparation to ask you to agree or disagree with a statement about the text. As usual, draw evidence from throughout the text and write 3 to 4 P paragraphs. It doesn't matter whether you agree or disagree, so long as you can back up your position from the text. A strong opinion is easier to defend than a neither agree nor disagree response. Your short comparison question, question 5, asks you to write 1 to 2 paragraphs explaining what each text says about a specific topic. Question 6 similarly asks you to compare the 2 texts on a specific aspect. It's another 10 marker, so we're looking for about 3 to 4 P paragraphs in approximately 10 minutes. Here is a sample question 4 comparing 2 imaginary texts on chicken farming in the 19th and 21st century. Let's break it down and then think of some sentence starters to relate. We start with a statement in inverted commas. There it is. The article shows that making a living as a chicken farmer is hard and unrewarding work. So you highlight the actual specific claim being investigated. In this case, making a living is hard and unrewarding. The next line is the actual question, and it's asking you to agree or disagree. Choose a position to defend and stick with it. There's evidence in the text for either position, so you need to to highlight the evidence which supports your chosen perspective. Then it tells you two things you should comment on. What the chicken farmer says, which will depend on whether the text is written by a farmer or is reporting an interview with a farmer. Be clear on what evidence you're selecting, and also remember that your answer should point to the question and point to the question text. Point to the question, point to the text, point to the question, point to the text. And of course, how he says it, which will include your discussion of techniques and word choices. The last part of the question is a constant refrain, not because it's irrelevant background noise, but quite the reverse. It is essential. You must refer to the text to support your comments. That's the whole point of the exam. You can infer meaning from implicit themes in the text, but try not to draw from your own extensive knowledge of chicken farming, as that's not the purpose of the exam. You can show that you are answering each part of the question by using a sentence starter, like these. To introduce a reference to the statement, you could start, "The statement claims." To answer the central question, you could either go with, "I wholeheartedly agree," or "I absolutely disagree." As previously mentioned, express a strong view to support. To introduce some evidence, you could say, "The farmer's comment X suggests Y," or highlighting a technique. "The idiomatic use of chicken to imply cowardice, ... To show that you have engaged with the text at each stage, you could say, "The view presented in the first, second, final part of the text is..." For top marks, you need to identify techniques. These are also useful in the writing element. So we're going to quickly run through the DeForest devices with reference to classic English literature. So, DeForest stands for direct address. For example, from Bridgerton, "Dear gentle reader," I don't sound quite like Julie Andrews, but you know, get the impression. This is a form of direct address where the writer is speaking directly to the reader, in this case through the device of Lady Whistledown. Alliteration. For example, "Once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered, weak and weary." Weak and weary, of course, is alliteration. This is from Edgar Allan Poe's The Raven. F stands for facts. You'll notice this is why this is particularly relevant for the transactional writing exam. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. There are other things here. You could argue for oxymoron, you could argue for juxtaposition, you could argue for all sorts of things here. However, it is presented as a fact. This is, of course, the famous opening line of Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens. O is the other side of that same coin, opinion. So, for example, Pride and Prejudice opens with, "It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife." The "must be in want of," the "must" there makes this opinion and not fact. R might stand for rhetorical questions. It can also stand for repetition, but here I'm going to suggest rhetorical questions, which are questions that do not require a response. For example, to be or not to be? That is the question. "Whether 'tis noble in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to rise against a sea of trial." I ought to do a recording of that someday. Hamlet, of course, as you knew. Emotive language. Emotive language. So this is language that makes you feel the feelings. So, for example, Kathy. "It's me, it's Kathy, I've come home." From Wuthering Heights. "Whatever our souls are made of, his and mine are the same." That needed to be in a Yorkshire accent. That didn't work at all. Sorry. So this idea of this is a really soul-wrenching admission from Kathy about Heathcliff. Not the cat, the other one. S, of course, would be something like statistics. So again, back to Charles Dickens, the average annual death rate per 1,000 in the Coketown districts was 60. This is from his book Hard Times. Then you've got triplets, or rule of three. When shall we three meet again? In thunder, lightning, or in rain? When the hurly-burly's done, when the battle's lost and won, where the place upon the heath, there to meet with Macbeth! So to speak. Thunder, lightning, or in rain would be an example of the rule of three or triplets. Shoving some of these devices in as answers to questions can show a higher engagement with language. Now, in the written section, you'll have two texts which you have to write. Yes, there are two pieces of writing, and you must do both. It is essential when you start writing something that you plan your work. Now, you'll all take a plan into the exam. At the end of each arm, you can create a 5-point plan where each finger is a paragraph. Imagine you have a question about keeping wild animals in a zoo, for example. You would start with an introduction. This is where you would define your terms, what is wild, what is zoo, etc., and outline the arguments which you will use in your main body. You might choose to use rhetorical questions as a hook. In the 3-point broad plan, this is where you tell them what you are going to tell them. The next logical step, of course, is to tell them. And this can be done in 3 main body paragraphs. For example, a paragraph on why the wild is better, which could include a metaphor. One about the risks of wild living could incorporate a simile. And a third about the educational and enriching work of zoos could use statistics to evidence your claims. Finally, you can tell them what you've told them in your conclusion. This is where you summarize your argument, add some final thoughts, and encourage your readers to take some action by using emotive language. You'll do this twice. Aim to allow half an hour for each text, including 5 minutes for planning, 20 minutes writing, that's an average of 4 minutes per paragraph, and 5 minutes to proofread for spag and content. Remember that in this part, spag is about 33% of the written mark. Finally, here are some top tips from people in the know. Firstly, identify your TAP. That is text type. Is it an article, a speech, a letter? Audience. Are you writing to your peers or peers in the House of Lords? And purpose. Is your text supposed to be descriptive or persuasive or instructive? These things will inform your style and tone. So be clear on your TAP before you start. Always plan. It'll save you time in the long run and will produce a better end result. Use DeForest devices. A good way to remember to do this is to write DeForest down the side of your question paper and tick them off as you use them. Write about 1.5 sides of A4 for each of the tasks. Feel free to space it out. You're not charged for using extra paper. Don't neglect the proofreading stage, especially for spelling, punctuation and grammar, but also for content. Make sure that you have answered every part of the question. Give strong opinions because they're easy to defend and to find evidence in favour of. Pick your opinion and stick with it, even if you find evidence to the contrary as you go through the text. This is good for the exam, but not necessarily for life, when your opinion should be able to change with new evidence. So, my last comment is, good luck. You've got this, so long as you remember your Kipling and know that if you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs, yours is the earth and everything that's in it, and, which is more, you'll pass the exam, my son. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If so, please remember to like, share and subscribe to Oak Tree English. Thank you.